All righty. Well, today I had the pleasure of having, this is incredible because I have the natural Mr. Olympia. If I'm wrong on any of these things, please stop me because I don't want to
All
give you
right.
credit if credit isn't due, but I'm sure it is. Mr. Olympia, natural Mr. Olympia. Let's be sure about that.
Yeah.
Natural Mr. Universe, natural Mr. North America. Pretty darn good, John. How are you?
Good. How are you, Ro?
John Hanson with me, right here on the Romeo program. I wanted to know what is the start? What was the start of all of this? What was the genesis of all of this, John? What got you into the swing of all this, and why did you stick to it? Because I think we're around about the same age all
hmm
these years.
The start came from superhero comic books when I was a kid. I used to read all the comic books. I became a big comic book fan, and I loved the superheroes. And one of the things I really liked about them was their physiques. They had these great muscular physiques. And when I started, I grew up in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. So bodybuilding wasn't really well known back then, and the whole fitness industry really wasn't around yet. So people weren't really working out or anything like that. You very rarely saw somebody with muscles. So the superheroes were really the only guys that I saw who had these muscular physiques. And then I think I was around like 11 or 12 years old. I saw a picture of Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee was like the first real person I saw who had a muscular physique.
Yeah.
So then I became a big Bruce Lee fan, and I started reading all the books and magazines about him. And one of the things he did was he was lifting weights for more power for his martial arts and also for his physique. So I asked my parents for a weight set that year for Christmas. And then when I got the weight set, that eventually led into bodybuilding. I didn't know what bodybuilding was at the time, but when I started buying the magazines and I found out what bodybuilding was, it was like that was my passion. And it's remained my passion all these years. So, they say that everybody has a passion in life, and that was definitely my passion.
I had that 110-pound set,
Yeah, that's
I
what I
think
had.
around about 1975 or so.
Right, right.
And my mother said, "What the hell did you order? What is this?" And I said, "Well, it's dumbbells and barbells, Mom. You're too young for that." She said, "Come on, go out and play baseball, go play basketball." I didn't
Right,
start then, John, myself, because they said you'd become quote unquote muscle bound. And
right.
I was a good
That
ball
too.
player. My father said you cannot lift weights, maybe Nautilus, but nothing else, he would
Yeah,
say to me. Did you
yeah.
run into the same problem with your parents?
Yeah, not only my parents, but the teachers at school. When I started to bring in the bodybuilding magazines to like my junior high, all the teachers would warn me, they'd say like, all that muscle will turn to fat when you get older and you'll become
Another
muscle bound. And
misconception, right?
yeah, yeah, all the wives' tales that were going around. And I mean, everybody was really adamant about it. They really believed that. My older relatives, my aunts, my uncles, it was like the teachers at school, everybody was saying the same thing.
Because I saw your mother and father on one of these videos that you make with Samir.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I saw your dad on his birthday come and wave. Your mother
yeah.
is a doll. She's so beautiful.
Thank you.
And I said, well, he's about my age, back in the days, the dark ages, the caveman days, when they weren't sure what these things were. What are these things? Because I
Right.
would go into a gym and there'd be a pulley system. There'd be the Nautilus machines, maybe three or four, and the
Yeah.
Universal. What was the first fully equipped gym that you found in your neighborhood?
Well, when I first started, I trained at home for a couple of years because there really were no gyms around. That was another thing from back then. The gyms, there were very few gyms. There was the hardcore gyms where the power lifters and the bodybuilders trained. And then, like you said, there was like the health clubs where they had the chrome weights and more of the nicer machines and the carpet and all that stuff. So there was really nothing around my area when I started. So before I had a driver's license, I just worked out at home for a couple of years. And then there was this gym called Jay's Body Shop in Alsip, Illinois. And it was just like a gym that these guys put together behind the garage of one of their houses. And it was just all homemade equipment and stuff. And so I trained there for a couple of years. And then I went to my first real gym when I was about, I think, 17 years old. And that was a gym where there was bodybuilders working out. There was power lifters. It was a hardcore gym. And I got into that whole bodybuilding atmosphere.
And we had no music. where it was quiet. You heard the clanging of the weights, which was
Yeah, yeah.
beautiful. That's music in of itself, actually,
Right,
if you're
right.
really into it. But yeah, and well, the first time you had the feeling that I want to go far with this endeavor, well, when was that, John?
Actually, it was when I was 14. I was reading the magazines and I was really getting into the bodybuilding. When I started bodybuilding, Arnold was retired for about 2 years, but he was still featured in the magazines a lot. And Franco Colombo and Frank Zane and Robbie Robinson. And there was a bodybuilder named Cal Scalak who won Mr. Universe that year that I got into it. And I remember reading the article when he won Mr. Universe and he's just standing on that podium, and Cal was he had a body like Arnold. He had the big arms, the big chest, the big upper back, and he was a good looking guy. And I said, man, that's what I want to do. I want to win Mr. Universe. Just seeing him on the podium winning Mr. Universe, and he had the kind of physique that I like because he had like an Arnold physique, which I loved Arnold's physique too. So right then I said, I want to win Mr. Universe. And I was telling people at school, I said, I'm going to be Mr. Universe one day,
Wow, at 14?
Yeah, at 14. So
Wow.
like
I was still
135
my basketball and baseball at that point, but that's wonderful. What year was that, if you don't mind giving it away?
1977.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit older than you. How about that? I'm older than everybody, but there's something to be said about making it a hobby, or saying to yourself, as you did, man, I want to make something out of this. I see myself on stage posing, so on and so forth. Did
Yeah.
you go that far in your imagination?
Yeah, I did. I was reading the magazines. There was a guy named Mike Mentzer who was he won Mr. America and he was trying to win Mr. Universe, and he was guest posing. I saw pictures of him guest posing in France, and he was giving seminars all over, and he had a mail order course of all these books that he sold, and he was the editor-in-chief of Muscle Builder, and I was a good writer, so I thought, well, I'm going to do what he does. I want to win Mr. Universe and then guest pose all over the world and give seminars and have my own books and maybe write for the magazines and all this. So that was kind of my plan back then. And it was kind of weird because I didn't know anything really about bodybuilding. I didn't know anything about genetics. I didn't know anything about steroids. I didn't know anything about the judging or the organizations. I didn't know all the ins and outs. It was just this pipe dream I had, but it was so strong that I ended up sticking with it. And I look back at it now, like 40 years ago. It's amazing that I had such a strong belief in it, and that I just like dived into the deep end of the pool and just really went all in without really knowing what I was getting into.
You mentioned Mentzer. He's a guy that everybody wants to know about.
Yeah.
Died, unfortunately, very young.
50 years old.
And his brother Ray went 2 days after, I do remember, or a day after, something like that. I do remember that.
Mm-hmm.
What was Mike like?
Well, Mike was interesting because back then, in the 70s, all the bodybuilders trained like Arnold did. They trained 6 days a week. They were doing 20 sets of body part, very high volume, and everybody was kind of overtraining and nobody really knew it. So Mentzer was the first guy to come along and say that you can train hard or you can train long. You can't do both. It's like you can't sprint a marathon. So he advocated this very hard, heavy duty training. That's what he called it, heavy duty training. And it was very intense, but very low volume. Like he would only do like 5 sets per body part, where other guys were doing 20 or 30 sets of body part. And he was only training like 4 days a week. But the difference between Mentzer and someone else like Arthur Jones, who came along before Mentzer with the Nautilus, Arthur Jones didn't have a bodybuilder physique. Mike Mentzer was already Mr. America on his way to being Mr. Universe. So people listened to him because he had the physique to back it up. And Mentzer really changed the sport. I mean, when you look at it, after that, everybody started training less. They started doing less sets. They started training harder. They started taking more rest days. And it was because of Mike Mentzer. So Mike Mentzer had a huge influence on the sport. He didn't really compete for very long. He stopped competing in 1980. So, but his influence is still felt today. And like you said, he's still popular. People still remember him all these years later.
Yeah, a masterful guy, spoke so well.
Yeah.
Unusual. Not that bodybuilders were ever dumb. The stereotype did not apply, but he kind of broke the mold for the general public to see that these guys really had a lot upstairs.
Yeah.
And I remember just seeing pictures of him, and he got jobbed in 1980. And
yeah,
he still,
did.
and that kind of made him sour on the whole thing, no?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a shame that happened, because I wish he would have kept going with it. He was still young when that happened. And it kind of, that one contest kind of affected his whole life. and he was very bitter about it for many years. He didn't trust the IFBB anymore, and maybe he was right, but I wish he would have kept going, because he did have a great physique, and I think he might have won Mr. Olympia if he would have stayed with it. Who knows?
Now, you had to have been seduced into doing drugs, or felt that you had the need to do it. See, me, I'm a little bit afraid of all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a lightweight. If I take an aspirin, John, I feel it. It's just ridiculous. I've never taken a drug of any kind. And, God bless you if you're into it, but I was never into it. And that's what drew me to you, actually, why I gave you the request, because I want to know why that decision, and how did you maintain that all these years?
Yeah, I didn't know anything about steroids when I started. I just thought these guys worked out and ate better, and that's why they looked like that. And then I read, when I started reading Muscle Builder magazine when I was a kid, when I was 14, every once in a while they would mention steroids. And then there was an interview with Arnold, I think in 1978, and they asked him about steroids, and he said that they always downplayed their use. He always said that he took them 3 months before a contest, and they only helped like maybe 10%. But if he didn't take it, then he wouldn't win. And but he also said something interesting in that article. He said that he would recommend that younger bodybuilders build their physiques through training and nutrition, and not use drugs when they're young, because he said the effects of drugs are temporary. So they only work when you take them, and then when you get off them, the effects go away. So that always stuck with me, and I really believed in that. And so when I started competing as a teenager, and eventually I could see that these other teenage bodybuilders I was competing against were not natural, they were taking drugs too. I, stuck to that to stay natural, and just keep building my body naturally. And then by the time I was 21, I had bulked up to 230 pounds, and without drugs. I did it all with just training and eating a lot of good food. So I took Arnold's advice and just did it all without it, because like he said, you have to build the foundation. You have to build your physique without the drugs, because the drugs are just temporary, and anything you build on that will go away once you get off them.
And you are gifted genetically. There's no doubt about that, because, some people can pound away and never really make the progress that you did. When you saw that growth, was that your stimulation, your motivation, and you saw, I could do this thing naturally, actually, maybe not compete with these water buffalo on stage. That's what they look like these days, in my opinion. I love the classic physique of the 70s, but did you say, I can't believe the mirror is telling me something that I never expected. I'm pretty darn good without enhancement.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Ralph, because when I started, when I was 14, I was so skinny. I didn't think I had good genetics at all. And I started training, and within a year, I put on 20 pounds, but I still felt like I was kind of skinny. And I had my brother take some pictures of me doing all the basic bodybuilding poses. And when I looked at the pictures, I could see that I had the bone structure. I had wide shoulders. I had a big rib cage. And some of the muscles I could see had good shape to them. Like I had a peak on my biceps, and my lats were attached really low, and my chest was kind of attached low and wide. So I said, I got the potential. I got the genetics long term. I wasn't the kind of guy that was able to put on muscle very easily. Like I've competed against guys like that. These guys were just genetic freaks. Once they started lifting weights, they just blew up. I didn't have that kind of physique. It took me years and years of training heavy and eating a lot of food in order to develop the size. But I did have the bone structure, and I did have the muscle shape, and a lot of my muscle and a lot of my body parts. So I thought, I've got long-term genetics, and it's just going to take a lot of work. And it did. It took 7 years of really hard training before I was able to get up to 230 pounds and start to look like what I always thought I could look like.
Did you find it, or did they mention to you that sport, it forces you to be too much into yourself? It's too narcissistic, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Did you find that as a detriment? Did people make those comments?
Yeah, kind of. And it is like that, because you're so focused on building your physique, and it is like a 24-hour-a-day sport. It's one of the most dedicated sports I think there is, because most sports you just go and you practice and you do it for that couple hours. But bodybuilding's all day, because you have to eat all day. And the eating part, the nutrition part, is such a big part of building your physique. And then especially when you get ready for competition, because the nutrition is so important. If that's off a little bit, you can lose the contest, because being ripped for the contest is one of the most important things with winning a show. So it is all consuming, and a lot of people think you're narcissistic because you're so into yourself. but it's not that you're narcissistic. It's just that the sport requires so much dedication and so much discipline because it is a 24-hour a day sport.
Did it help you in other facets of your life? Did you see other parts of your life improving?
Well, it definitely helped with discipline. You know, you have to have great discipline to be a bodybuilder. So I really developed a lot of discipline. It helps with goal setting, and eventually it developed my confidence. I wasn't a very confident kid when I started. I was kind of shy, but this really brought out the confidence. You know, once you start achieving goals, especially like winning contests or even just improving your physique or doing lifts in the gym that you couldn't do before, you really start to believe in yourself. And it's a great feeling when these dreams that you had and these goals that you had start to actually come to fruition and come true. It has a great effect on your confidence.
Who was the guy you patterned yourself after, if anybody?
Definitely Arnold. Arnold was the man.
Arnold was the guy for many
Yeah.
guys, and yeah. Well, why him? Because he was the most prominent, or something else?
Well, first of all, I loved his physique, but second of all, he was the king. He was the best. And when I got into bodybuilding, like I said, he had been retired for a couple of years. And I remember in 1977 when Pumping Iron came out, there was an interview with him in the Chicago Tribune because I grew up in Chicago. And he said in that interview, he said, "I'm going to be a major movie star. I'm not just going to be an actor. I'm going to be a major movie star." And people were kind of making fun of him at the time because he couldn't speak English. He had this long name. They didn't think he could be an actor at all. And then watching that come true as the 80s unfolded and he made Conan and then Terminator, I'm like, wow, he's doing it. You know, look, he said he was going to do this in 1977 and now here he is and he's doing it. That he became like my God. I was like, God, this guy's like unbelievable. He's like, he was the #1 bodybuilder and now he's becoming a #1 actor. And he predicted all this and he kind of did it with his mind. You know, his attitude was always so positive all the time. And he had these big goals and he believed in himself. And I think that more than even his physique is what made me, you know, idolize Arnold so much. And I also loved his physique. I thought he had such a great physique because he was massive, but he was also very symmetrical. His posing was so powerful and he was so confident on stage. Anybody who's seen the movie Pumping Iron, how he handled himself, how he was so charismatic and he psyched out everybody. And yeah, he was the man for sure.
Well, my guy was always Zane because I can identify with Zane. He wasn't massive. Yeah. I was never going to be massive. When I first started training, I got big on Twinkies. You know, I ate everything in sight. But Zane was my guy. Did you have any connection with Frank Zane? Who were your contemporaries aside from your idol, Arnold?
Yeah, I mean, Frank Zane I loved because he was Mr. Olympia when I started bodybuilding in 1977. In fact, I got to see Zane win all 3 of his Mr. Olympia wins because those contests were held in Columbus and I lived in Chicago. And I asked my dad when I was 14 if we could go to Columbus to see the Mr. Olympia. And he took the whole family out there on a family trip. And me and my brother and him went to go watch the contest at night. So I got to see Zane. And then, of course, I read all his articles in the magazines. And I really liked Frank's approach because he was so analytical and he was into dreams and he would analyze his physique and he would analyze his training. And he was really, really into the mental part of it, into the visualization part. He always said mantras to himself to psych himself up. And he was very, very much into the mental and spiritual part, which you don't really see that much anymore with the bodybuilders. You know, now it's just all physical, but Zane was very much into the mental and he really had to be perfect to win. Because he was so much smaller than everybody else. He was only like 185, 190 pounds, and he was competing against some really big guys. And I remember going to the contest every year, and I was always wondering, can he pull it off again? Can he win? But he was so perfect on the years that he won. His tan was perfect. His trunks were perfect. His posing was perfect. His attitude was perfect. But he had to have that in order to win. So he was a great bodybuilder, one of the best ever, I think.
They always say he you know, again, I have Mentzer and Zane, very intellectual, these two, and very, you know, not the cookie cutter mold that you get these days. And again, we always say that it sounds like get off my lawn. I'm an old man now. These guys these days, they can't do it. But really, it had more character, it had more characters, actually. It's just, I don't know. I used to, you know, they were unreal because they were in a magazine. The
Yeah.
only thing I ever knew, any connection, John Hanson with me, natural Mr. Olympia, by the way. The only connection I had was that glossy magazine where you saw them so perfectly ripped,
Yeah.
and you said, "Is that even possible for a human being to get that way?" Never a mention of any drugs, never a mention of any anabolics, nothing
Mhm.
like that. So they led the ordinary person into thinking, "Well, I can do that. Here's a 6-day routine, twice to the gym each day. I can do that." But in essence, they really couldn't. When did you find out that that couldn't be done at that level without enhancement? When did that dawn on you?
Well, I think I realized it when I was competing as a teenager because, like, I didn't realize in the beginning, like the first teenage contest I did, I didn't realize that teenagers did steroids too. I thought, like what Arnold said, the only guys that were using steroids were the guys like in the Mr. Universe or the Mr. Olympia at the very, very top. But, I didn't understand that a lot of people were taking steroids.
Oh, yeah.
Teenagers were taking them. And then when I started working out at that hardcore gym, I saw guys who didn't even compete taking steroids. And this was in the early 1980s. So this was before steroids were illegal. So they were open. I mean, the guy at the front desk would sell you the drugs if you wanted them. I would see guys in the locker room shooting each other up, like shooting their training partner up before they would go work out. So it was really, really out in the open then. So then I realized, once I got into the competition part of it, I saw that this is in all areas of the sport for sure.
Let me throw some names at you. Just first thing that pops into your mind, Robbie Robinson.
Yeah, great physique. I saw Robbie compete in that first Mr. Olympia I went to in 1977. And all year long, they were saying Robbie was going to be Mr. Olympia because he was the new superstar after Arnold retired. They thought he would be Mr. Olympia, not Frank Zane, because Robbie had kind of like a combination of Sergio Oliva and Arnold. He had the very tiny waist, he had the huge lats, he had incredible biceps, just amazing. And he was such a fantastic physique, but mentally he just couldn't seem to get it together for the Mr. Olympia. He was always a little off. Like that year he was off, but he was a machine, man. That guy would train 6 days a week all year long, and he was in shape all year. And I think that kind of hurt him that year that he did the Olympia, because he was trying to stay in shape all year, and then he finally burnt out by the time the end of the year came, where Zane peaked on that day.
Now let's harken back to 1983. Your partner on one of these wonderful videos that you do, Samir Bannout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think of him? What in '83 was he one of the best you've ever seen?
Yeah, I mean, Samir was, I remember me and all my friends at the gym, we'd look at pictures of Samir all those years and we'd be like, God, this guy's got the most incredible physique because he's got such a small waist and wide shoulders. And he was just so beautiful looking, so symmetrical, but he never could come in shape. And then finally in 1982 and 1983, he hit his peak and he did win the Mr. Olympia. So I'm so glad that Samir did that because he deserves it. He had one of the best physiques in bodybuilding. Even though he never won it after that, he just won that first one. But Samir, I'm glad he was able to win Mr. Olympia, and that'll stay with him the rest of his life, of course.
Well, I had Brainham on the other day, and another mind and a half. Brainham, he's got the right last name, I'll tell you that. But
right.
I'm engrossed in his videos too. He praised a guy named Muhammad Makawi. And I remember him, these guys are, I'm a little over 6 feet. I think you're on the taller side. Are you 6 feet?
No, I wish. I'm 5'8".
Okay. Because I think these guys, Samir and Makawi, weren't they about maybe 5'6", 5'6.5", something like that?
But yeah, isn't Samir's like 5'7", yeah.
With Makawi, he was so symmetrical, such a wonderful poser. Is it an advantage to be smaller in this sport? Did you find it to be a distinct advantage to be on the small side, short side?
No, I think the taller guys have an advantage. It's just that when you get tall, it's hard to look, symmetrical and big enough. And very few tall guys can put it all together. I think the average height for a bodybuilder is probably like 5'8" to 5'10". Makawe was much smaller. He was only 5'2". So, but he did have a great symmetrical physique. And what set him apart from everybody, of course, was his muscularity, his conditioning. He was so shredded. Plus his posing was absolutely fantastic. And here we are like 40 years later, everybody still admires Makawe's posing. It was just so beautiful. and it just takes you away. He poses this classical music, and the transitions and everything were just amazing.
And the emphasis is not on posing these days.
No,
It's
unfortunately,
more
not at
about
all.
the presentation. They don't seem to matter. It doesn't matter to these competitors all that
No,
much anymore. I think that's a mistake. The beauty of the sport is gone when the posing is not emphasized.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You know, if you read the book Pumping Iron, they talk about how important the posing is. And I've done interviews with Charles Gaines, the author of that book, and he describes how posing is what kind of allows the general public to really appreciate bodybuilding, because that's how you show your physique, is through the posing. So it's extremely important. And bodybuilding is the only sport ever where what you do to prepare for the sport is different than what you do in the competition. You know, to prepare for the sport, you train with weights, you diet, you do cardio. That's how you prepare the physique. But when you go into competition, you pose. And that's why the posing is so important. If you don't present your physique, then all that hard work really isn't going to be shown to the public or to the judges. And that's where you bridge the gap between, you know, really showing how beautiful this sport can be, because that's the creative, artistic part of the sport, is the posing. And if you don't show that correctly, then you're not really, like I told people, I said, you're not really a bodybuilder. If you can't do that, if you can't really creatively and artistically present your physique in your posing routine, then you're really not a bodybuilder. You're half a bodybuilder. You know how to prepare for it, but you don't know how to present it. So you're not doing your job.
And some guys are naturally better, and I understand that they have more rhythmic ability. But I think everybody, if they devote the time, they can learn a little bit better than they're doing these days. John Hanson,
Absolutely.
John Hanson here, and wonderful to have him on the Romeo program. Hey, what about? Can you ever train too much? Can you, overdo it? You know, I hear people talk about these knockdown, drag out workouts. They have to recover. For full recovery isn't done under 5 days from these immense workouts. You know, when is enough enough? Should you leave the gym with a little left in the tank, or should you leave completely spent?
Yeah, that's what I believe in. I believe in training hard, stimulating the muscle, but like you said, leave a little bit in the tank. And I think when you're younger, it's different. You know, when you're younger, you want to prove that you're super hard, you know, you're hardcore, and you're going to keep going and going until you collapse or throw up. And I did the same thing when I was younger, but it's really not necessary. You just have to stimulate enough to stimulate the muscle, and then you recuperate, and then you do it again. So as I've gotten older, I don't train to all out intensity like that. I don't train to complete failure, because I find that that's when I start hurting myself. That's when I start straining stuff or hurting the joints. So I still train hard, and I still train pretty heavy for my age, but I do hold back just a little bit. And then I try to make it a little bit more intense each week. What I do now, Ralph, is I'll have like 6-week cycles where I'll start with a certain weight and a certain amount of repetitions. And then every week, the intensity goes up a little bit. And then after that 6 weeks, I'll take a little bit of a break for 1 week, and then I'll start another cycle. And I love that, because I know exactly what I have to do each workout. I know what weights I have to do, how many reps I have to do. It makes me excited about doing every training session, but I know it's not going to be a continuous thing where I'm going to be training super, super hard all year long. It is just for 6 weeks, and then you take a break, and then, you know, it's much better doing it in cycles like that.
And how about those basic movements, John? Are they still the best? You know, the 8 exercises, 9, 10 exercises that you cannot go wrong, or should we vary it more? Or, you know, for basic, you know, say a guy has an hour to work out, maybe 3-4 times a week. What should he do in the gym? What should she do, whomever it is in the gym, if they have a limited amount of time?
Well, I think the basic exercises are really important, but it's up to the individual. You know, I mean, if someone doesn't like doing barbell exercises or dumbbell exercises, they prefer doing machines, that's fine. The great thing about the compound basic movements is they train so many muscle groups at one time. So if I'm going to do a barbell bent over row, it's for my lats, of course, but I'm also training the biceps and the rear deltoids, and then my lower back is engaged because I'm holding the weight when I'm bending over, and also the hamstrings are even working. So there's a lot of muscle groups working, where if you did more of an isolation exercise on a machine, it might isolate one muscle group, but it's not going to train a number of muscle groups at one time. So that's why I still love doing the compound exercises. I get the most bang for my buck from those exercises, and I still love doing them. You just have to kind of moderate it as you get older and do what you can do, and don't go too heavy if it hurts you, you know.
And supplements. What's a waste of time and what's necessary? You can't, you can go and walk into a health food store and just spend your whole paycheck.
Yeah, sure.
So if you're on a budget of some kind, and my listeners aren't necessarily all bodybuilders like what's geared in your videos, so I have to be more general in my questions. But I'm just wondering, what is it? What do you do when you have a limited budget, but yet you want to supplement your diet properly? Your advice on that.
Well, as far as vitamins and minerals, I would take a multivitamin, and I would also take extra vitamin C and zinc and vitamin D3. Those are the good ones for as far as your immune system and your health. As far as like workout supplements, I always believe in a good protein powder. I'll usually have, if I eat 6 meals a day, I only have one meal where I'm having a protein drink. And then you can have, there's like carbohydrate supplements that I can take before my workout, which is just basically like a carbohydrate powder. And I could take a little bit of that before I work out. That'll give me some more energy, maybe some branched chain amino acids to help with the recuperation and the muscle breakdown. But yeah, that's basically it. Just protein powder, maybe some carbohydrate powder, the branched chain aminos, and then just the basics with the vitamin and mineral supplementation.
What do you think of intermittent fasting?
I don't believe in it. Some people like it. I believe in eating. I think you should eat more meals. I think the more meals you eat, the more your metabolism works. I understand the concept of it, because when you're not eating and the blood sugar level is low, that's when your growth hormone level goes up. And when your growth hormone level goes up, that's what gets the fat mobilization going, where you're mobilizing stored body fat. But if I'm trying to lose body weight, I'm also trying to hold on to the muscle tissue. So I want to eat like as many meals as I can, like 5 or 6 meals, to spread that protein out throughout the day. And I'll also take in carbohydrates. It's just your calories have to be below maintenance. And as long as your calories are below maintenance, you will lose weight and you will lose fat. Yeah, I just prefer eating. I don't really like the intermittent fasting, but it probably works good for people who don't like eating, in the morning, and they can have like a 12 or 14 or 16-hour break in between meals.
I went back to 6 meals per day recently.
Yeah.
I didn't feel good on that anymore, John. It was just too much of an overload for me anyway. At 62 years old, so now I'm not eating till about 12 noon. And sometimes I wake up at 4 o'clock. It's rough to be up 8 hours without any food. But this morning I did the fasted cardio. I took a run around the neighborhood here. I came in here, did my bike, and so on and so forth. Do you think that fasted cardio burns fat more so than cardio in the middle of the day?
I think the fasted cardio is good, and I do that as well. But I also like doing it right after a workout, because after the workout, you're burning the glycogen during your weight training, because you're using carbohydrates for energy during the weight training. So the glycogen is stored carbs in the muscles. So that should be depleted after a hard weight training workout. So when you go do the cardio right after, you can get away actually with doing a little bit less cardio, because you're already in a depleted state. And I really like that as well. I just did that today when I worked out. I just worked out for like an hour, and then I did 20 minutes on the treadmill right after. And I seem to feel that a little bit more than doing it fasted in the morning. But I think they're both good.
You're so dedicated, because I said, can we do this interview at 4 o'clock? And you said, no, I have to go to the gym. And I understood. I said, this guy has a schedule. He's got to keep out of it, Romeo, So I said, 6 o'clock. And I thought you were in California for some reason, but you're on the right side of the country here.
Yeah.
I'm in New York. So, but the whole thing with the, it's so, the social media stars, so to speak, compared to the real McCoy kind of guys. You got people up there just making a name for themselves because they make a video, they set the camera up, and they're a little bit muscular and they make a name for themselves. What's the difference between these fly-by-nighters and the ones that are the real McCoys, the real things?
Yeah, we're living in a whole different world.
Strange world, John.
A strange world, yeah. So Yeah,
Wasn't it better without the cell phone, without all this nonsense?
it
As
seems like
great
it,
as
yeah.
it is that we can talk right now, I can actually see you.
Yeah, yeah.
It's something from the Jetsons, by the way. Remember in the
Right.
Jetsons where they had the screen and you
Yeah, yeah.
the George Jetson talking to his wife? He said that's never going to happen, but here we are.
Here we are, right?
What are the difference between the real McCoys and these fly by nighters? Meaning, who are the real stars? Who should we really follow? Do we take advice from one of these YouTubers or other social media stars as fact, or should we be very skeptical?
Oh, I think you should be very skeptical because just because someone is looks good on camera and has a good personality, can come across good on camera, that doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. I mean, you just mentioned Jerry Brainham. I mean, Jerry's got a lot of education, a lot of experience. He's been around for probably 50, 60 years in the sport. I mean, this guy knows what he's talking about, but that doesn't mean he's going to get a million views, when he does his videos. So you have to be very skeptical. And I see this all the time in the gym. I see these young guys training and I'm like, where are they getting this? Why are they training like this? They're training very light and they're doing all these weird exercises and there's no intensity. They're not building any muscle, or they're on the other side of it where they're doing super heavy weights or deadlifting extremely heavy weights so they could slam it on the floor and share it with their audience on YouTube. So it's one.
The slam is very important. The slam, that's big.
Yeah. I think the deadlift now is taking over from the bench press. When we were young, everybody wanted to know how much can you bench press. Now everybody wants to deadlift because I think deadlifting looks more impressive on camera.
It's a little dangerous, if you get a novice in there deadlifting, you can destroy yourself. I was a trainer for years. I stayed away, maybe the stiff-legged deadlift, but not necessarily the other.
I'd agree with you.
Now, the deaths, the early deaths that we withstand in bodybuilding, you can't avoid them. You can't not talk about it because they're facts. Doug Brignoli was on my program 3-4 times, unique approach to training, leverage, and all that kind of thing. Very interesting guy. My age, I remember that exactly. Born in 1960. He passed away in a mysterious circumstance. COVID, maybe not COVID, the vaccine.
Yeah.
Did you know Doug?
Yeah, I interviewed him as well. And I, of course, knew about Doug from watching him compete all the way from when he was a teenager all the way through the Mr. America. He was in the Mr. America many times, and I think the Mr. Universe, the AAU Mr. Universe. He had a great physique, kind of like a Frank Zane type of physique. He wasn't that big. And I interviewed him on my Bodybuilding Legends podcast, and the same thing, like you said, he was very much into the kinesiology and the leverages and very unique approach to training. And I was absolutely shocked when he passed away because he was in great shape. I remember he was posting on social media showing what shape he was in. And then all of a sudden he was gone. So I was absolutely shocked.
You know what he said? He said beforehand, he believed in the vaccine very strongly. And he said beforehand, if I die, then you have evidence that this is bad. And he actually passed away.
Yeah.
And all you see are the comments. Yeah, he proved it all right. He died. So people are very cold, very callous.
Yeah.
Somebody's passing away. Leave him alone. For God's sakes, it could be you next. People. Yeah. I don't mean you. I mean the person that's making these comments. And I thought that very cruel. But then I said to myself, it's just so strange how we don't know. Now, he wasn't heavily into anabolics and testosterone. I think he did just enough to get by. I'm not saying he was natural like yourself, but he was very sparse in his use, right?
Yeah.
What do you think happened to this man?
They said it was COVID, right? Isn't that what they said?
Yeah, and then I heard from some reliable people that he had a bad reaction to the vaccine. I say that because my wife had a bad reaction to the vaccine, where we went to the emergency room the same day she got the vaccine. I shouldn't even say this. I was never vaccinated, not because I'm a hard ass, just because I'm just afraid. I don't know. It just was something I felt innately that I should not do. And I didn't do it. And I got the virus and I got a little sick. Taste and smell went away. That gave it away, John, because that mimics nothing else. If you have no taste and smell, it's something you've never had before. That's an odd thing to have. So I knew I had it. I got through it. I was okay. My wife got very sick from the vaccine. If you don't want to answer, I understand.
No.
Were you full-fledged on this vaccine? Did you take all the boosters and everything?
No, I was like you. I didn't take it either. I didn't
Did you
trust
get the
it.
virus?
I think I did. I never got tested if I did or not, but to me, it was like the flu. I was just kind of wiped out. It was like about a year ago. So I think I got one of the later variations of it. And it just seemed like it was the flu. But then the next week, I was really wiped out. Like when I went back to the gym and it was over, I remember my endurance was really down. And a few people that had, I forget what variation that was, but they said, yeah, you had it because I had all of the symptoms. But I was working actually as a security guard during COVID in a hospital, and I would run into people that had COVID all the time, and I never got it, and I never took the vaccine. So
I think some people have the propensity to get really sick from that, and some
yeah,
people not so much. I had a guy down at my radio station. He was fine, and he was dead within 5 days. It was
wow,
terrible.
yeah,
Terrible. John Hanson with me, Mr. Natural Olympia. I may add that. Now, there was a guy who I used to follow back in the old days, Bertil Fox.
yeah,
He got into some trouble. Now he's out now. Do you
yes,
remember Bertil Fox? Just for the
oh
hell of
yeah,
it, I'm just curious about this guy. Do you
for sure.
remember Bertil Fox and what kind of man he was, or were you shocked at what happened? I'm sure you were.
Yeah, I definitely remember Bertil because he was one of the most massive bodybuilders at that time. He was incredibly massive. He was competing in England, where he was from, and he won the NABBA Mr. Universe. And I remember, like, again, being a teenager following the sport, me and my friends from the gym would always wonder, wow, how would this guy do in the Mr. Olympia? Because he was so much bigger than everybody else. And then he eventually did come over and compete, and he never won Mr. Olympia, but he looked his best the year that Samir won the Olympia, and Bertil only got fifth place. But yeah, I think Bertil was just a very insecure person, and I think he had problems with, just believing in himself. And I talked to Rick Wayne, who was a great writer for the Weider magazines, and Rick knew Bertil pretty well. And he said Bertil was just comfortable training in the gym. He wasn't comfortable getting up on stage. He wasn't comfortable with the pressures of competing. And yeah, he did end up shooting his girlfriend, or was his wife, I think, and or maybe his fiance and her mother, and he
And
killed
the
them both.
mother too. Yes.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
did he get out of jail? I have no idea. How is he out of prison? I don't
yeah.
understand. But again, I'm not judge and jury here, but my goodness. But I read about that recently that he was out. I had read about the whole catastrophe, and I
Hmm.
said, wow, he's out. And wow, somebody else can go and rob a piece of bubble gum and get maybe 5 years, but some people get off on offing people. It's unbelievable to me. Well, here's the thing. I was wondering now, when you talk about some people are not geared to go up there and be nude, almost nude. You got
Hmm.
these little posing trunks that are like what do you call it, dental floss.
Yeah,
And to me, it's a little much.
yeah.
You can disagree, John. I love when no skin off my back, but I'm saying that to me, it's a little much. Do you think it's gone too far? They go up there, they're bopping around, they're wasting time. The time they should spend actually posing in a choreographed routine, they
Yeah.
spend just prancing around with their little string bikinis. It's a little odd. The sport is
Right.
weird these days, no?
It is. It is. Yeah. Again, they're getting away from the art of posing, and that's what the sport is all about. And I can't emphasize how important that is enough. It's so important that they present the physique as a living sculpture. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. And when they do the dancing, and when they don't know how to pose, it just goes to show they're not preparing for the contest. They're not taking the posing seriously, and no one else is doing the good posing. That's the problem. We all learn from the professionals. We all watch the professionals. That's how it was when I was a kid. And when I was a kid, we had guys like Ed Corney and Chris Dickerson and Frank Zane, and these guys were all master posers. Even Arnold was a fantastic poser. So it was like a kind of respect for the sport where you had to pose well. And when I was competing in these local shows in Chicago as a teenager, it was like sometimes there'd be like 80 guys in a teenage show, and everybody in the show you could tell they were trying to do a good routine. Some were better than others, but everyone respected the sport enough where they were putting work into it. And they don't do that anymore at all now. And we were just talking about this on the podcast with Samir. We were saying that now with social media, if someone comes along and does a fantastic routine, Now they have a chance of being recognized worldwide. You didn't have that opportunity before. Before, the contests weren't being filmed with somebody's phone. There was no YouTube. You just had the magazines. So if somebody comes along now and does do a fantastic routine, they will be known around the world. That video might be shared millions of times. So these guys are really missing the boat, and they're really missing an opportunity. And besides, like I said, this is what bodybuilding is all about. This is a part of the sport. So if you're not doing that correctly, you're not a real bodybuilder, and you're not respecting the sport. You're not, because this is how you present the physique. And this is, if they want to bridge the gap from where bodybuilding is with the hardcore fans out into the general public, they need to do it with great posing routines.
Were you more into the freaky bodies or more so a Zane type body? What do you fancy, you know?
Well, being kind of skinny myself, I like the guys that were more massive, but you also had to have the symmetry, and you also had to have the small waist like Arnold did. You know, Arnold had those, he wasn't the smallest waisted guy, but he knew how to pose correctly. He did those 3/4 back poses. You had the wide shoulders, and the symmetry and the beauty of the physique was always important back then. And that's something I think that we've lost a little bit now, because the guys are so big, and because of the drugs, they're allowed to get bigger than they've ever been before. You know, those guys couldn't get this big back in the 1970s or 80s, but because of all these other drugs they're using and the amounts they're using, that's why they're able to morph into these superhuman people. And they're just so big, they've lost the symmetry, they've lost the beauty.
Are you still writing for Iron Man?
No, I stopped doing that when John Balick sold the magazine. Jerry Brainham did the same thing. We all stopped writing for him then. So no, I'm not writing for any of the magazines now.
How about the books you've written? I know you wrote something, Natural Bodybuilding.
Yeah, that was the first book I wrote in 2005. That was with the publishing company Human Kinetics. So that was a really good book. It encompassed everything: how to pose, how to train. We broke down all the body parts. So that was a great book. It took a long time to write that. And then since then, I've written some other books just independently on Amazon. I wrote Bodybuilding Heroes and Legends, Volume 1, which was some great stories about the 1970s competitions with Arnold and Sergio and Frank Zane and guys like that. And then I wrote a workout book called the MP6 Workout, which kind of details the cycles that I do, like I was just talking about, before. And then I also wrote Diary of a Natural Bodybuilder, which details in detail, like the training and diet programs I use for all the natural bodybuilding shows that I did, and what I learned from each contest, and how I was able to change my training and diet to win the contest.
What are you eating these days? How has your diet changed now that you're a bit older?
Well, I'm getting in shape now because I just turned 60 this year, so I want to get in great shape for the summer and show how good you could look at 60. So I'm dieting now. So I'm eating around 2,300 calories. As I said, I'm eating like 6 meals a day, probably about 220, 230 grams of protein, probably the same amount of carbohydrates, maybe even a little bit more, and about 50 or 60 grams of fat a day. So I'm counting up my macros, weighing my food, and being real meticulous about it. When you get older, you have to go a little bit lower in calories, and it takes a little bit longer to lose the fat. You know, like when I was dieting for the first Natural Mr. Universe I won, and when I was 29, I could diet on 3,000 calories. Now I have to go down to like 23 or 2,400 calories to lose the same weight. So, and it's much slower too.
How about these, and I won't keep you too much longer. How about these drinks, these post-workouts, pre-workouts, all the minutia they go through? It's unbelievable what they have in their gym bag these days. What do you feel about? Is it oversaturated, that market? Is it is it too much?
Yeah, the pre-workout drinks are really like a big seller, because everybody's looking for that energy, before your workout. But I've always believed that your energy should come from eating great food before your workout. So if I work out in the middle of the day, I probably had at least 2 meals already, and those meals should contain complex carbohydrates like oatmeal or brown rice or some type of healthy food, which contains carbohydrates, and that'll be stored in my body, and that's what I'll be using as energy. So you shouldn't have to rely on just a drink that you're going to drink right before the workout in order to get your energy. It really comes from the nutrition that you're eating.
Do you make sure your protein sources are from, grass-fed beef, organic chicken, so on and so forth? Do Do you watch that, or does it matter to you?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes I try to get my beef like grass fed, but I just try to get a variety of protein sources like egg whites and whole eggs and chicken and fish, turkey. I'll get extra lean turkey, sometimes round steak like 3 days a week, salmon 3 days a week, and then some protein powder as well.
How many eggs a day?
Well, I eat like 7 egg whites and 1 or 2 whole eggs for breakfast. And sometimes my last meal, I have another 6 egg whites. So yeah, I eat a lot of eggs.
The egg whites are big time with the bodybuilders. They love the egg
Yeah.
whites. I always
Yeah.
have the whole egg. I actually go a little crazy with the eggs. And eggs had such a bad rap, heart attack, cholesterol.
Mhm.
Cholesterol myth. You've heard this, if you
Yeah.
eat too much we need that saturated fat.
Yeah, we do.
Don't you think that was, a false narrative back then?
Oh yeah, for sure. And the saturated fat helps with your testosterone levels because of the cholesterol. So you need that. Yeah, like you said.
All right. Well, hey, John Hanson, where can they find you right now when they want to hear more? Because I'm just scratching the surface.
My website is johnhansonfitness.com. So if you need any help with your training or nutrition, you can go to that website. I also do a weekly podcast called Bodybuilding Legends. So you can find that where you find your podcast. And it's also on my YouTube channel, which is under my name. And then, of course, the Muscle Maturity podcast with Samir and Nick Trigili each week.
Okay. And that's a great one. That's where I
Thank
found
you.
John. I mean, I've seen you before, but never in, if Samir can stop talking for 10 minutes, maybe you can get a word in. But no, actually, he's got some kind of draw to him. There's something, he's just very authentic, very real. So you can't. And
He's got a lot of energy.
Yeah, and don't fault me because I'm not sure was the other guy a championship bodybuilder, or am I wrong?
Yeah, Nick is
what's his last name?
Nick Trigili. Yeah, he won the NPC USA championships, I believe. I'm not sure what year it was. A good 10 years ago, I think. And he competed. I don't think he ever competed as a pro though, and then he stopped. But now he's doing his own YouTube channel that's very popular.
Okay. Hey, John, thank you so much. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah, Ralph, I really loved it. Thanks, man.
Okay, man. Thank you.